assume.
It seems so.
It's comfortable.
It's good enough. All right. So, what should we talk about?
There's some kind of question I have, not sure. It has to do with mind-body, body-mind.
Mm-hmm.
Like sometimes it seems like my body rebels against my mind somehow.
Does
Thinking
it
of
carry protest signs?
it's like as soon as I sit, it wants to fall asleep. And it gets to the end of the session, and I suddenly wake up even before the bell rings. I just like it knows, and it wakes me up. I don't know. It's just, I just have a question if how the body fits into the mind. I mean, I know.
Yeah, that's it. Can you explore it a little bit more to...
It's almost like it reacts independently of me when I'm sitting, and it reacts when I don't. When I try to meditate, it reacts. I don't know how to say it.
Okay, I'm getting a little thread out of this. But if you have more, just keep going.
I'm trying. It's hard to, because it's kind of an experience, so it's hard to put words to it.
Yeah.
But sometimes I just feel like my body is separate from where my thought, I don't know, my mind.
Mm-hmm.
Like it's just kind of there.
Just kind of there.
Thoughts still going when your body is sleepy? Okay, so there's like a split.
Well, let's kind of explore it here, roll it around a bit. This is a good area for exploration. And to look at it more carefully and more subtly. just to sit with it. Perhaps one of the things that may happen in a circumstance like this is like, hey, wait a minute, what are you doing? And then we get kind of wrapped up in this notion of how come you're not with the program, and what can I do to get you with the program, and things like that, and that's fine, that comes up, but the ability to start to look more carefully when you notice something, anything that you notice, you can start to look into it more carefully. And the notion that you could actually make a similar point when you say your mind doesn't obey your mind either. And that one we prove rather quickly when we say, you, mind, stay on experience of breath. It says, I'm bored. And it goes off and does something else. So there is a way in which our usual sense of me being this person, kind of the person who's running the show, that there's some piece of that starts to it starts to become clearer exactly what's going on with that, I think. But it's a kind of a subtle process. It's a very subtle process. The kinds of things that happen when we feel these kinds of disjunctions, they're useful to look at. Do you have any initial thoughts, Dora?
Well, it is an interesting question. Of course, on the one hand, everything arises from mind in mind. So, in one sense, there's nothing separate. It's just our experience arising. And we would say in Buddhism that it's arising out of Buddha nature, out of mind. But on the other hand, we also say the body is like an inn, I-N-N, right? Like the inn. We're just staying here for a while, and then we're going to move on from this home, so don't get too attached. So there is something, in a way, something separate. And when we talk about meditation, we talk about the body being a support. So that's why we have the straight spine and try to have the right amount of caffeine, not too much, not too little, so that our body will be a support for meditation. So in some senses, they're very interconnected, even though they're not exactly the same. But there is a phenomena some of us have had where it's been known to happen, where a person gets habituated to sit down to meditate, fall asleep. And then, like you say, it might not even be because I'm tired. It might be that's just what started happening. And yeah, when I'm done meditating, wow, I'm not tired anymore. So that's something that I had that for. I mean, I still get sleepy, but it's not quite as, like I definitely had a period when it was just really on and off. And something needed to be, I just needed to make enough change in my approach, just to be aware of it and kind of stop doing a certain kind of checking out, a certain kind of lulling myself to sleep that I was kind of doing at the beginning of meditation. I mean, it just became a pattern, and I've heard of other people talking about that, of just getting into a routine of it, and that somehow it does take something to break that. But yeah, so just
You
a few
have
things.
suggestion on how to break that?
Part of it is the shorter session piece and emphasizing the vividness more. Yeah, that's what Eric said he did on retreat. He had a cup of cold water, and it's like already in Mirek, and in the winter it's cold, and just poured water on his head.
To me, it works in this way, that when it's really strong, I just lay down. To me, it works in this way. When it's very strong, I just lay down and I have like a minute nap. And then I wake up, it's gone. But not everybody.
Yeah, I think
that can work.
I mean, if it's sometimes, I mean,
I
I'm
think
saying.
sometimes that's too, there is another possibility of just that we are quite exhausted, and that we actually need
yes,
some sleep.
working in the button factory.
For me, really, that 2 minute or 1 minute sleep just takes everything away. And I do the same thing when I drive. So sometimes I fall asleep when I'm driving. I just stop, sleep, 2 minutes, and it's gone. But in general, I watch myself when I'm so tired. I mean, like, when that happens, I start watching it. I use it as my mean to do my meditation instead of rejecting it, or judging it. Say, okay, this is what I need to do today. I need to watch this, and I just watch that.
It's worth making a distinction between whether or not you are actually tired, and whether you're just establishing a kind of a space out pattern. And it can happen in different ways. One thing that I experience sometimes, I don't feel sleepy exactly, but I am tired out, but I don't feel sleepy, like as in I'm feeling. It's more like sudden, like lights out, wouldn't like from completely awake to gone. And that one I associate more with the actual exhaustion.
My own experience with it, just to try and, I don't know, add anything that can be helpful. But yeah, I think making a distinction between whether you're actually tired or your mind's tired. I think that like the mind-body connection is generally like downplayed in Western culture, that there isn't so much of a distinction like we've been talking about. But I think for what's worked for me is just like you have dullness in your mind, if you have dullness in your body, you can like look into that experience, I guess, just like any other experience that's appearing in the mind. That's the only thing that's worked for me. But sometimes I think it is helpful to understand whether you're just physically exhausted or there's dullness in the mind that's like it being established in the body. But that's just my experience.
Yeah. If when we are experiencing exhaustion, it's good to take care of that. And then pushing ourselves in meditation can actually be very kind of counterproductive, because it will turn it into kind of a big job of some kind. It's like I did all this work and now I have to do my 1 hour. I have to do this 1 hour job of meditation, and that will accelerate exhaustion. The relationship between mind and body is an interesting one, and one of the elements in practice, one of the elements in posture actually has to do with what's called the subtle body, which is basically it's more like the energy patterns. In Tibetan, it's soksol, like life force, the vitality, and so that's one of the reasons to use one of the you could say official, but one of the beneficial postures that have been found, and kind of sitting up straight in a balanced way does allow for the energy to kind of flow in a more free fashion. Lying down, sort of walking, there's 4: standing, walking, sitting, lying down. They're actually official meditation postures. And so with those, it will facilitate the kind of the energies flowing in a more free and coherent way. There are practices where we can actually work directly with those energies, but they're usually not taught until we have more experience with just basically stabilizing the mind in a kind of a very clear way. And I don't know all the reasons, but one of the reasons I think is that it's good in this culture to be a bit reserved about going into those practices, is that we can tend towards liking entertaining experiences. Kind of my boring old day-to-day life, I want to feel something exotic. Maybe I'll take LSD, or maybe I'll go to this crazy yoga class where they do this super intensive breathing and they feel really different after a while. So just feeling different is not particularly a mark of anything. So it's good to be good to have some kind of clarity about that. But it's also good to just recognize that that's something that's going on. And those kinds of processes are going to be not in the camp of I want my body to work like this, or I don't want to be sleepy, or that it's not a matter of giving orders the way we like to do with the kind of the conscious thought processes. So it's different.
Well, one thing of possible help, if you're not totally exhausted, but you're just more in a pattern of zoning out in a certain way, is to, try whatever the most interesting meditation practice you can think of. What is something you've learned in all the teachings you've had that might be, just might grab your attention more. And, if it's, you can sit here and silently recite a mantra, or you can, do Tonglen, or you can do contemplations. So you don't have to be doing just the standard shamatha. Yeah.
Yeah, something more interesting and engaging. It's not the time for the hair shirt of the most boring practice, you know. Yeah, doing something more interesting. Yeah. I actually found one time during a retreat, when a group retreat, when I was quite exhausted. That it was, I thought, okay, I'm not going to be able to give myself a pep talk. There's no beating around the bush. I'm literally just falling over. So I thought, I'm going out. So maybe I can take some awareness with me. Kind of, we're going down together. It was that kind of, all for one and one for all. And so what I did was there's the meditation with the white tigle, the white dot at the forehead, brilliant one. So I placed my attention as intently on that as possible, and just it was like sort of the metaphor. My mental metaphor was like I got on a motorcycle and gunned it and went straight into a snowdrift, just like. And that was very interesting. So when you're just really, it's different than the kind of sort of blanking out or just kind of a little groggy. This is like, no, when you're really, really sleepy, then you can do some things that you can't do with the kind of half-baked sleepy. You got to get the really good sleepy going for that. But that's interesting, because it does change your relationship with this thing that you think is kind of this kind of I know what this is about. It's like this. Then you find out that's even this is really interesting. But while we're on the topic of the mind-body thing, there are some things that are taught that are, I think, they're taught relatively openly, and things. Those of you who've taken part in the Mahamudra seminar know the 3-round clearing of the breath, and that's actually just a very simple thing that can actually kind of set up our meditation. And do people want to know that? All right, okay. You know, yeah, that one, yeah. So placing the thumb on the ring finger, at the base of the ring finger, and making a gentle closed fist. And then there are 3 breaths, and each one is kind of deep and kind of a long, extended exhale with a kind of sort of a shape to it. It's called the wheat breath. It's not like really, really slowly starting and really, really slowly finishing. It starts a little. You'll hear it when we do it. But there are 3 breaths, and on the first one, we imagine through all our pores. It's kind of very full exhalation, and through all our pores, all the everything, all the energetic detritus of the past is just goes out like a cloud of light, cloud of smoke through all our pores. And then when we inhale, and this is true for each of the 3, so out is like that, and in is like little, like tiny particles of rainbow light entering through all pores and filling our body. And we take a full breath, but not like a super full, not like, but just a very full breath. So there are 3 breaths like that, and the first one is associated with the letting go of this kind of karmic detritus of the past, and then of the present, and then of the future. And it also tends to kind of provide a little wakefulness. Sometimes you'll hear teachers might suggest take a few kind of full breaths to start the meditation session, and this is for some people that will be like the non-esoteric version of this, just the kind of the easy approach to it. So we can try it. And as you exhale, your hands extend along your thighs and your hands open. And then when you inhale, your hands come in like that. So. And one way to place the mind at the beginning of a meditation session, if you do that right as you're beginning to meditate, is you can just, having brought this kind of cloud of very vibrant, kind of dancing rainbow light particles filling your entire body, just allow them to dissolve into space and just rest your mind in that space. So that's one way to kind of change the energy of the moment when you're starting a session. And that's a kind of practice that actually changes over the long term. Kind of it's quite simple, but if you do it on a daily basis over years, then it starts to feel different.
Recently, I'm starting to feel like I've jumped into the deep end, and I don't really know how to swim as well as I thought I did. So I'm feeling the need to get back to the basics, and I'm thinking shamatha here seems to be the most basic practice, and can you recommend a good way to get thoroughly grounded in that?
There are a number of ways you could approach it, but I'll just pretend there's one, just for the time being. And sometimes pretending there's only one thing to do takes the spinning doubt out of the equation. So I think probably the one of the most common go-to versions of shamatha calm abiding, is just being aware of the sensation of the air as it passes in and out of the nostrils. And to start out, it can be helpful to actually count. So as you inhale, it's kind of arbitrary whether it's at the end of the inhale or the exhale. 1. But you count kind of sort of like 1, not like 1. It's just kind of a light touch. And count to 21. And maybe do that a couple of times, maybe 3 times. But it's good to do short sessions. So, and to do short sessions many times a day is the general kind of lineage-wide recommendation. So we come and we violate the advice of the lineage by sitting here for 50 minutes, especially when Bill decides to see what happens if he doesn't consciously give a break. So that I think is that's a good place to start to kind of keep it simple. You can get more complicated than that, but I think getting more complicated actually defeats the purpose. Do you have any additional?
Shouldn't have asked. I'll get more complicated. But just to say that, I mean, the breath, there's different ways to pay attention to the breath. And if you can see whether you, doing it right at the nostrils is one, and another is just any sensation in the body associated with breathing. So I think it's worth deciding which of those that you would like to do. But I agree that the counting can be very useful for really developing the skill. And if you lose track of where you are, you start over, it doesn't matter. But 21's arbitrary, but traditional. And even the one, isn't it like 7 times that we do it on the
sometimes
in the Mahmudra program, 1 day a week? That's the.
No, it's 21.
21, right? But
21.
Don't we do it 7 rounds of
7
21?
rounds,
Anyway, you can count, but it's also true that if you feel like you're getting a hang of it with the counting, then going without the counting is good. Because sometimes you don't want to really build up an addiction to the counting. Because then it'll be there when you don't want it there anymore.
You go around all day kind of obsessively counting to yourself, but absolutely no awareness of your breath.
Right. But it's really helpful. How was it?
Yeah.
About 3 minutes, a little bit longer. So I developed this kind of like, attachment to like how long is 21 breaths.
Oh, we're so clever, aren't
Which
we?
I guess the 7 times then is, maybe something like the length of the recommended meditation session in the Mahmudra program, the minimum. Yeah. So,
Yeah.
makes sense.
Yeah. It's good to point out there's some variations on the breath, and to know kind of generally what goes on with it. If we pay attention just to the sensation at the nostril, that's a more kind of focused and vivid place. It's maybe easier to kind of be there because it's very particular. But just the overall sense of the movement of the body as it breathes. That one can be, perhaps that one goes along more with in moments where relaxation, kind of placing relaxation kind of more at the center, because it's more general. This one's just a little more on the vivid side. So those are just a few, and now we'll stop making it complicated. But the simple thing about the practice that I think you know already is that you place your attention, you kind of really put some energy on it, then you relax into it, just let the awareness really just settle. And when you're distracted, you just start it over again. The coming back, and that's not like, oh, it's the failure. That's the practice. The practice is actually noticing that you're gone, and then finding out that you have this incredible freedom to return to the breath.
And the idea is we kind of try to keep an awareness of whether we're getting, kind of dull and spaced out, or agitated and full of distraction. So just keeping an eye on that and trying to keep a balance of alertness and relaxation. So the goals. Yeah. And making short sessions can be within a longer session. If you have 20 minutes in the morning or something, you can break that up and have yourself take a little break every 5 minutes. Stand up or move around or whatever, and so that you really try to make the most of each. Because it's short, maybe you don't sort of like let yourself, well, I can start meditating a little more intently.
I got an hour.
Later. Yeah,
I can pick up the pace around 50
right.
minutes.
So trying to really keep on, be on the task as careful, in a careful way. It's helpful.
No, but the microphone's right next to you.
So, Linda's question kind of just made me think about whether in the Dharma is there any teaching about whether there is free will?
The exact framing of that is that's a Western debate, but it really does tie in very much with close examination of karma. And certainly you could say that without awareness, free will is probably, you could say, illusory. With yeah.
So usually we are run by our patterns. So once you can, with awareness, be aware of your patterns, and say, at least for that nanosecond, I'm going to choose a different route.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
It's. I think that's the moment in which there is
Yeah.
free will in my opinion.
And it's the patterns are cumulatively, they accrete over time. So the little things, you could say, well, if we've never contemplated the faults of a certain kind of behavior, if we've never contemplated that, the patterns that propagate are one kind of pattern. But if we've actually actively contemplated the harm that comes from certain kinds of behavior, and we've done that on a regular basis, then there are other patterns that come out of that. But it requires moments of clarity and awareness where you can actually place your mind on cultivating some kind of positive condition, and that will then create other places. But in terms of a philosophical question, I think I would just boil it down to that point of awareness. That if you're to the extent that we're actually have the capability have penetrating awareness in what's arising in the moment, there is actually some possibility for not being carried by the momentum. And at the deepest level on that, that's when you might find teachings that say karma is actually not real. But it's good to keep in mind what it takes to actually be there. It's not a philosophical point. It's not kind of an intellectual toy. It's actually the challenge in a teaching like that is, how would I actually become so profoundly clear beyond even the notion of an I being clear, so that the entrapment of karma was not there.
Well, I'm remembering it seems like we've been taught that, like, kind of every moment there's this, it's a ripening of karma. And that, for instance, and if that ripens, let's say, in a certain way that tends to trigger a certain kind of reaction in us, so like, let's say, an anger or something, that we can experience that many times, where similar thing, feel angry, that just comes up. But there's, the teaching that if that trigger happens, that at a certain point, if we just let that arise, and we don't and we don't react, that karma ripens, and it's said, then they say, well, then that karma's finished. Whereas otherwise, it's propelling us kind of to, like, create a new karma that's, maybe negative in that case. So we create the anger karma and the anger, each time. But then at a certain point, which is kind of the same thing, I think that Louisa and Bill are saying, that as we learn, which is part of the point of shamatha meditation, is so that we can get a space, that we can have an awareness, that we can possibly not react in the way that we customarily.
So that is why we practice.
That's a big piece, yeah.
Mm-hmm. Maybe just a 2-second delay.
Yeah, or 1 second. Yeah, maybe it starts with a delay, and then,
Yeah.
Yeah, that'd be long.
If you really could manage a 2-second delay in karmic reactivity, you might almost be enlightened.
I feel like there's
If
another
it really was really complete.
teaching. We don't do much, or we don't teach the 12 links of interdependent origination, which is a standard teaching in Buddhism. That kind of is it's a way of talking about experience and, kind of from the beginning to the end. And this, you see something and you immediately have a response to it that's a feeling, and then and then there's kind of the next thing and the next thing, and then you die, and then you're born, and then so that it just all keeps happening and happening. But in that teaching, and I, so obviously I don't remember it well or know it well, but I remember hearing it explained that there's a bunch of this that it just goes one to the next, to the next, to the next, but there is a place where the potential to let that thing go is there, So to me, that's kind of the free will thing.
Mm-hmm.
I'd say, I could add something. Sometimes getting really clear about your intentions can help. Like, I think there's a lot of behaviorism that we're trying to break habits, essentially, that may have been established across lifetimes. But even going to the gym or breaking a simple habit involves, why do you want to do it in the first place? Like, you have to be clear about your intentions before you even take action, which it requires like self-reflection, right? So that takes time to like turn inwards and see like what are your priorities, or all that happens before you actually take action. So I think that a discussion about like the space to have any kind of clarity or any kind of just moment to look at what your intentions are. So I think like when we start a session with bodhicitta, why are we doing this in the first place? We're kind of like, we're using a behavioral approach in a sense that we want to start a new habit. So that's kind of my take on it, because I think that there's a lot of just behaviorism, and it's like, how do you end a habit, or how do you create a new habit? And there's kind of like there's some psychology that, and even the West adds to that, of how to start habits or create habits.
Why did you ask?
I just was listening to a discussion about it on the radio, and it's just, I don't know, just Linda's question put it in my head about whether, like, I don't know, who's in charge. And I was just curious if there was a kind of a, like, no, we really don't have free will philosophy, or, but.
Yeah, I heard something recently that was very explicitly about kind of the physiology of free will or lack thereof, and the psychology of it, and it really, in the end, it sounded very much like they were talking about what we're talking about. That degrees of freedom are rather small without real clear intention and awareness. That it doesn't happen without really paying attention.
But in some way, the enlightenment is based on free will.
Yeah, it's
Not the enlightenment
Yeah, yeah.
We have two words, different words in Italian.
The enlightenment.
The
The enlightenment.
The enlightenment versus enlightenment.
Mhm.
Versus what?
The enlightenment is a philosophical movement.
Instead of enlightenment, okay.
Mm.
I have two different words in my language.
So we can roll this energy forward, that it might be the source for moments of free will in our being and in the stream of being of all beings. Virtue may I quickly realize Mahamudra and establish all beings without exception in this state. Thank you all.
Small crowd, nice.
That's Monday through Friday.
This one.